Hello everyone, and welcome to my new podcast mini-series, A Penny for Your Thoughts on Sustainability. I have guests from all over the world and we'll be talking about their thoughts on sustainability and how they do their part to make the world a greener place.
Right, I'm Susan Krumdieck. My maiden name was Ryder, and as you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from New Zealand. I am from Colorado in the US. I grew up in a very rural, very small town up in the Rocky Mountains, and I think that really formed a lot of what I thought people could do. I know that living in a town of 800 people is not easy, that people are cantankerous. It's almost part of the entertainment to have the gossip and the struggles and the big dramas.
Yeah.
But I also know that the community cooperated in ways that I never saw again when I moved to the big city to go to university. And I really was torn between anthropology and mechanical engineering, obviously, because
they're two very similar subjects.
I know. But it turns out that that's what I've done is I've combined those two because we are energy beings. Like as a species, we wouldn't exist if it wasn't for energy. We can't possibly support our brains on food that isn't cooked. We have to cook. Yeah. And that's been true for millions of years, right? So we are people of the fire. And when we have a fire, we gather around it. We build behaviors. Because we have such big brains as infants, we're very helpless. So we have to work together. And all of it, comes from being around that fire. And now, my formative moment with energy, I think, was the OPEC oil embargo. People who remember that, you have this moment when things went from normal to pretty abnormal. Yeah. And behaviors changed. People were hoarding fuel and getting very afraid and worried. And this is a very formative thing, this event. And so I really started wondering about this connection with energy and our society and our ability to be civilized. And so, I went into mechanical engineering and I also took all of the sociology and anthropology classes that I could fit in.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And you might not be surprised that those two are totally different worlds, even though I see them as the same.
Yeah.
So when I finished my PhD, I wanted to work on energy for the people, the energy we need, not energy as a business, not energy for, as a way to wield power, but energy for people. And I really couldn't find a place in the US. And then there was a advert to open in New Zealand. And when we got the globe out and figured out where New Zealand was,
it's quite a long way away from everywhere.
It was a long ways away. And that they spoke English. Yeah. Then we packed up the kids and went to New Zealand. And I spent 22 years there teaching mechanical engineering. Yeah. And chasing down my research questions. I wouldn't have been any good working, in industry because I have to follow what I'm curious about. So if anybody out there is hopelessly curious, research might be a good field for you. You do have to teach people what's known, but that keeps you on your toes. Absolutely, yeah.
It's a bit like having graduates working for you. They ask you questions that you haven't thought about for decades, and you have to think of an answer.
Right. And in New Zealand, in my research, while I was teaching the lads how to put carbon in the air, basically, I was also researching how do we, as a civilization, change to save ourselves. Mm-hmm. And again, it's all about energy. Our ability to behave in a civilized manner depends on our not being afraid and panicking and becoming antisocial. So whoever it is who's supplying energy for us to meet our needs, this really has to be done. And it has to be done in a way that people understand and can participate in. And that is absolutely not just electricity.
No.
It is our transport, our ability to access activities, the ability to move goods around. We really have a massive challenge here. And so I think we made lots of progress in my research at Canterbury University. I had a lot of students, 25 students, and a lot of collaborators. And we just really kept asking these questions that nobody else seemed to be asking and setting up rigorous research to investigate that, and then seeing things in a new way that really, I think, makes me a hopeful person looking forward, because I can see that we can do things differently.
Okay.
It is an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary endeavor. It's a whole system endeavor, but it can be done.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, that's true of humans. We usually find a way to fix things, but it sometimes the motivation needs to be quite severe before people want to move, because change is difficult, and people don't like change, no matter what it is, whether it's for the worse or for the better. Change is something that people generally don't like. We like our lives to be as they are, and I'm very known. So I think, I mean, this is one issue that is affecting the whole planet, and it's one that we all need to carry our own weight on, I think. So yeah, it's good. What I'd like to do is, there's a few other questions I want to ask, but I'd like to circle back to some of the research that you were doing and talk a little bit more about that at UC, if that's all right.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things, a couple of the questions I wanted to ask is, what do you think is actually the roadblocks that's preventing us coming up with the solutions for the energy crisis that we've currently got? Because that's what it comes down to. Right.
Well, you hit on a minute ago when you said people don't like to change, right?
Yeah.
And I started off by talking about anthropology, the way that people organize themselves and build that organization into culture and into tradition and into taboos.
Yeah.
And I think that it has been part of our ability to survive that we don't change that. Mm-hmm. That when we have tradition, there's a reason it's called tradition. It's because what we always do and what we will always do. And baked into those traditions, baked into the taboos, are the recipe for sustainability. Because you're either sustainable or you're not.
Yeah.
And so if you have a way that works and it continues to work, then you better keep doing it. And there's way more risk in going off and doing some new thing that, and innovating.
It's unproven. Yeah.
Exactly. You could really mess things up, and you could mess things up permanently. And so we should embrace that fact that we don't like to change, because that is baked into us by 100,000 years of experience. Mm-hmm. But if we understand that that's where it's coming from, that we really we are risk averse and we shouldn't just embrace any crazy new thing, then why are we having a hard time finding our way to a safer way to exist, one that we can survive, really? Probably because our current story is that it's innovation that's going to save us. We're looking for solutions, right? Yeah. And I think that might be the mistake, that there aren't solutions to the thing that we've done. That, that's that same old thinking being applied to the problem that got you into the problem. What we really need to be looking at, so if you can school yourself to not use the word solution and instead use the word next step, the thing we're going to try now, and we're going to do that deliberately and carefully and see how it goes and be ready to pull back, but be ready to learn. And this is the Edmund Hillary approach. Edmund Hillary approach.
Yeah.
Yes. If you're going to do a crazy thing and go somewhere you haven't gone before, then you can have a plan, you can have a map, you can take along someone who knows the way, but then every step you have to stay alert, be aware, and really chart your progress, navigate, explore, that sort of thing. Yeah. So you can see how different the thought space we're in when we're talking about exploring than we are if we're expecting solution.
Yeah. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting their solution to come out of doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, isn't that the definition of idiocy that Einstein came up with? Doing the same thing.
That.
Yeah.
Right.
Trying to get fair enough. Okay. So what, I mean, do you see any other issues? Like, one of the things I was wondering is whether there's a geopolitics playing a role in this, that there's a lot of money floating around in the current way of doing things for big corporations. And is that being a hindrance to us coming up with a solution, would you say?
Well, I tell you, I've been really trying to dig into the history of the capitalist idea, that idea about getting a hold of resources, getting a hold of something that people before had open access to, so the commons, and then forming a corporation and charging people rents to then use the thing. And so if you sort of wander back in time, you see that the access to housing, for example, has, in the past, it's gone along with your place in the world. It's gone along with the work you were doing in the world. And this idea now that we have to go into a huge debt, we have to pay so much of our income just to have a place to live. That is such a new idea. But it's a very capitalist idea. So something as essential to human existence as the shelter where we spend our night, and the fact that our market system is happy to deprive people of that. That's just
it's wrong on so many levels. It's wrong.
It's not right. And it keeps going. Our system deprives people of the basic energy they need to meet their needs if they can't. My parents in the UK, they're retired. They haven't got very good pensions, and they have told me in the past that they've had to make a decision between food and heating. Well, I mean, they should never be in a position. No one on the planet should ever be in a position where you need to choose between food and heating, because they're basic essentials of living. And certainly, if you're in a temperate climate like the UK, you can't go without heating, because in the winter it gets bloody cold. And it frustrates me that we've got a planet that's got a lot of resources, but we're using them so badly. And certain people have access to a lot more than everybody else. And they're hoarding that, and they're charging everybody else a fortune for the basic essentials of life. Which I don't know. As I've got older, I've become less and less right-wing and more socialist in my outlook. I think recognising that we're doing a bad job of looking after ourselves and those around us at the moment, and this energy crisis is part of that, I think. I was just in New Zealand in August, meeting my new grandbaby, the Mokapuna.
Okay, nice.
And it really depressed me how expensive the food is. I would turn out whatever government let the food get that expensive too. I don't care what their philosophy is. I have no idea how people on a moderate income can afford to eat. It was really shocking.
Well, it's driving. I mean, crime's going up, and that's definite impact of the economic crisis as well that New Zealand's in at the moment. And I mean, there's a whole load of issues around that, I think. But I mean, just going back to focus on the energy side of things. One of the things I think is a factor in our inability to really get into exploring new options is a lack of understanding. Not understanding really what the issue is, not understanding that having a new car has an impact, that buying all those new clothes has an impact, that having the next shiny thing has an impact. That lack of that sort of basic understanding of what that drives. You buy a mobile phone and it lasts for 2 years, and then you buy another mobile phone. Well, why don't we design a mobile phone that lasts for 20 years?
Right.
Because that would impact a lot less. Those sort of decisions that people just don't seem to join the dots, I don't think, generally speaking.
Well, put the anthropology cap back on. One of the things that I've hunted down is words. For example, consumer. Just looking at the use of the word consumer, I don't think at the turn of the last century, 1900s, that if you called someone a consumer, it would make sense to them. They would be a mason or a fisher or a farmer or... And to call someone a consumer, that might even be insulting.
Yeah, that implies all you're doing is taking and not giving.
Yeah, so somebody has changed the way that we talk about ourselves, and the power of words is really maybe more powerful than we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you refer to yourself or your fellow human beings or your fellow community members as consumers, as opposed to who they are and what they contribute, that would be one of the first things to change, because it's that definition as consumers that is driving all the stuff you're talking about, the unthinking consumption.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked a lot about the problems.
Yeah. What are the solutions?
And the question I just always have is, well, there must be a way to change that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I call transition engineering. And it doesn't have to be just about energy, that's for sure, because the way that we're going to change the energy systems, we're going to have to change the economic systems and the social systems and the governance systems as well, because that survivable energy system, not just this fluke that we're in right now, it really requires a different kind of economy and society, which we need to explore our way into, because I don't know that there's a playbook for it. I don't know that there's, a particular label you could put on it, like socialism or something that would solve the problems. It just won't. What we do know is we can recognize what's wrong when we see it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think what I'd like to do now, just circle back onto what you were researching when you were at UC, and what you thought were some of the potential areas to explore.
Right. Well, if I could wrap up a lot of different research into a common theme, that common theme would be, how do we do that then?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can have lots of you can understand the problems. And a lot of the sustainability people that I've run into over many, many years, what they're really doing is understanding the problems. Mm-hmm. Right? Dr. Mike Joy measuring the nitrates and the other pollutants in our waters. That would, classify us as sustainability research, because it's looking at the problems. So does that help us figure out how do we change that then? Right? Mm-hmm. So you have to understand the problem. So good on them, the scientists measuring and warning us about what we're doing so wrong. But they aren't actually warning us about what we're doing. They're telling us about the outcome of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then if you look upstream to what it is that's causing that problem, you will see industrial technical enterprise. Mm-hmm. That's what's there causing that problem.
Absolutely.
Or here's who. That's what it is. And so that question of how does this change is the pertinent question, because it doesn't need to change. It's profitable at the moment. It's legal at the moment. Yeah. It is satisfying the shareholders at the moment. The government is regulating it to exist as it does at the moment. So where in that whole wicked problem are actually the avenues for change? Mm-hmm. And intelligent change, so that you are legal and you are regulated and you are also survivable. And that's where I know the word engineering. If you have a problem with your foundation, you're going to appreciate engineering. If you want to get across a river, you're going to appreciate engineering. But if you're talking about society, you say, well, I don't actually think that word's appropriate. Thank you.
Well, but we have been engineered into the position we're in. It's been created by a set of circumstances that other people have imposed upon us. And, So, an engineering solution does seem appropriate, but maybe people won't like it, but that doesn't mean that it's not right.
Well, those systems that we're talking about, I called it an industrial. Industrial just means a large scale, as opposed to cottage or traditional, right? So industrial is another version of this. Technological, it is using technology and enterprise. So industrial technological enterprise. And enterprise means we making the money. We're doing the business. Right. And of course, that business is providing things that we all consume.
Yes, or that we desire rather than need.
Right. Well, the whole trick is consumption, right? If I consume it, then I paid for it. And that was the point. Didn't matter if I needed it or if it was healthy for me. If we can just keep the consumption going, then we're all good. Yes. So those systems are, here's a word for you, wicked.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So these industrial technical enterprises and our dependence on them are wicked because, number one, they do work. they have very good engineering behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they work pretty good.
Yes,
probably the best we've ever seen in history, in fact.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to toddle out to your vehicle, plunk your butt down, and maybe move your foot a little bit and be able to go 80 kilometers an hour in perfect comfort. Holy moly.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, really, when you break it down, isn't it?
It's pretty impressive. That's mechanical engineering for you, and a bit of chemical engineering. Oh, and some civil engineering of the roads, and some electrical engineering. Okay, that's engineering.
Yes.
But that enterprise is also unsustainable. Mm-hmm. So there's the pressures that we start to have. That it's unsustainable, meaning not survivable. That's kind of what that's what unsustainable means.
Yep.
But we meet our basic needs through this system, and we don't know how to do it another way.
Yeah.
So we don't have alternatives. We don't have resilience. We don't have adaptability. And that's by design, really, because otherwise, how do you keep the consumption going? And this system causes so much harms that we can see right in our face. And
well, just look at Europe this summer.
Huh?
Just look at the wildfires in Europe this summer.
Oh man, so many harms. And those harms actually are part of why we can't change, because we don't like the harms. We want them to stop. We share them on Facebook. Look at the plastic floating in the ocean, right? Look at and it takes up our time. It absorbs our thought energy away from that questions of actually changing. So while it's really important for the scientists to be showing us the harms, it's not helping to solve anything. Mm-hmm. Then the next thing that keeps these problems wicked is that we really want a solution.
Yeah.
Right. We want a green solution. And so we think someone should solve the problem. And so we turn to our politicians. Well, they don't even know what's going on. Yeah. Or we turn back to the technological enterprise itself, and they'll, oh, well, yeah, sure, we have a green thing here, consume away, right? So we want these green solutions, and so we keep expecting, solutions from the same entity that's causing the problem. That's a bit of a problem. So what makes the problems wicked is that there's just no avenue to change them. There's no way they're going to change. Does that sound pretty wicked?
It sounds terrifying, actually.
I know. So one of the first things that came out of our research, well, not first, it took us a while to figure it out, but one of the important things that came out of our research was a way to get past those wicked problems, to actually figure out what it is that's lurking behind this kind of swirling wicked mess that's actually driving it, and that is essential, and that in fact it's at odds with the essential needs we're trying to fulfill. Mm-hmm. And that then lets us define a problem for change that's outside that wicked problem.
Okay.
And then we can start to make progress. We can start to engineer the transitions.
What was the thing that you identified through your research then?
What we identified was that you really have to focus on a particular place, and on a particular essential need that needs to be met. Because we can agree that life matters, and that's where we're going to start, is that unsustainability is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we give ourselves permission to undertake this transition engineering, this change project. Yeah. And you've got to give yourself permission, because we don't actually have the institutions yet to demand that.
Okay.
You're starting to hear things like transition plan or something like that, but it's just sneaking in. So at this moment, transition engineering is subversive. It's heretical.
Well, that's how I think if you look at any major change in our society, it has been subversive. It's been something that's been the mainstream has said, no, that's wrong. That's against everything we understand. And it's those challenges that really take society forward. If you look back over human history, it's the people that created the biggest change were seen as heretics.
Yes.
Mainstream.
And do you know why they were successful? This is a thing I found when I look for these heretics. It's that even though they were very afraid, because heretics should be afraid that the business as usual is not welcome to you.
No.
Even though they were afraid, the ones that made the difference were the ones who stood up to that fear anyway.
Yeah.
They just went ahead. They faced the fear. They said, what's the worst that can happen? And well, that's not as bad as what's already going on. So I'm going to face that fear and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to take a step.
Yeah.
So in transition engineering, what we found was that a methodology, there's a step 1, step 2, step 3, there's a methodology that we follow. That is how you overcome the fear. Yeah. It's really helpful. And how do I know that? Because I taught thermodynamics for 25 years. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more terrifying than thermodynamics. And the only way to do it is to trust that the methodology will work and you just follow the steps.
Yeah. Still doing it now. That's my job, thermodynamics, really.
Oh, is it?
I'm a building services engineer by training. So I design building services systems, and that's all about thermodynamics.
So you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, yes. I thought it was the lecturer that was terrifying, to be honest.
We do know these methods, but and in all engineering, those methods are what let us overcome what are really impossible things to do. Yeah. Is that we have a method, and what's the method based on? It's based on science, first principles.
It's that. Well, I think that's that old adage: "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." It's that kind of approach, isn't it? Really, it may seem like the problem is too big to solve, but if you take the right steps, one at a time in the right order, you'll get to the end. And that's something I think
that's what we worked on. We just tried a lot and studied a lot of psychology and anthropology and sociology, behavior, while we're trying to engineer new systems. Because guess what? It's not just an engineering problem at all. It's a whole tribe problem, but you can't not have the engineers in there either. The engineering fields have to evolve. They have to evolve to not accept unsustainability. But they can't do that unless they've got, a textbook.
A set of rules.
So in 2020, I published a textbook called Transition Engineering.
Okay.
So first step taken. I just took all the good research we had and the method that works. It's a step-by-step method that engineers do their part, and you take your community and your stakeholders along on the journey. So it's kind of like the exploring thing we were talking about. No assumed solutions, no tech solutions, a journey of understanding what change looks like and how we can do it. Can't solve the world. You can't solve everything at once. So it is a very ground up approach as well. Mm-hmm. A particular place, a particular essential need, and we work from there to.
So, one of the things that springs to mind there is an essential need is that everyone needs somewhere to live.
Yes, that's an essential need.
So you're starting from that point of view. What would the steps be that you think would need to be taken to allow everyone to have somewhere to live?
Oh man, we are doing that in my new job here in Orkney.
Okay. You're in the Orkney Isles. That is a remote location.
Yes, it is remote.
You don't get much more remote than that, even in New Zealand.
True. I hung out in Christchurch for a lot of years. That's a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first woman promoted to full professor in engineering.
Really?
At Canterbury. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So progress was made.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And like I said, very successful in this research and other stuff like geothermal research and material science research. And after the quakes, you remember that?
I do, yes.
The quakes.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we have to now call them the Christchurch quakes, but after the quakes, that question of, okay, how do we look at this problem of a place to live in a new way so that we can do it right this time, right? And so we applied that. And if you happen to find my research website, there's the program was called From the Ground Up.
Okay. Well, what I'd ask, Susan, if you send me the link to that, I will put it on the show notes when I publish this episode.
Sure.
Sorry for the interruption.
We applied all of that approach. And what we found, so let's start with the wicked problem. The wicked problem is housing, affordable housing, access to housing, and being able to live in the community that you need to be in. I mean, let's admit it, Rolliston is not the answer to housing in Christchurch, right?
No, I mean, I think, that's that,
Right. So that's the wicked problem. It certainly is wicked. Housing is the essential need. And as you analyze that using this method, what you see is behind it is the market. The way that we have access to housing is called the housing market. Mm-hmm. That market includes bankers or banks creating money called a mortgage and then charging us rent for that. It involves manipulation of the access to housing to create artificial scarcity.
Yep.
And that artificial scarcity then, because what we believe is that the price should go up, then it goes up because we have to work with agents.
Yeah.
And it's in their interest to drive the price up. And if you have a
percentage,
exactly. And if you own a house and you've paid not just that exorbitant price of the house, but all of that rents on the money to buy the house, the interest rate, the interest, then you are convinced that you hold this wealth.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't actually serve any customers. You didn't fix anybody's knee. No. You just lived in a house, but now you're convinced that you have a lot of wealth because you did that. And so the poor next person who needs a house has to pay you a crazy amount of money. And let's just remember that the price that we have in our head for what a house is worth is in our head.
Yeah.
It's not derived from first principles. So the market system by which we have access to houses is one of these things that's wrong.
Yeah.
And so we started looking at, okay, well, how would a market work differently so that it makes sense? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I can study the history of it and kind of see how it happened, but it never did make sense from the outset. Yeah. You know, we had almost no price inflation of houses before the 1900s.
Well, at the time, I mean, if you go back a little bit further, you built the house yourself with materials you got from where you were. It cost you nothing other than your time.
And your friends and your family usually had help.
Yeah, I mean, it was a cooperative effort to build a house that you then lived in, and you never moved house because you lived where you worked, usually. And I think, that part of the thing for me, when you look at the energy crisis, part of it is the fact that we now want to work somewhere and live somewhere else. And that journey.
Oh, I wouldn't say we want to. I would say the market is broken.
Yeah,
because I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But think about it. You look at a map and look at where you work and put a pin in it and say, okay, today I want to find a place to live within 4 kilometers of that place. Yeah. And today, the number of houses that are for sale or for rent in that community where you need to be is about 1% of the community of the houses that are there.
Yeah.
And that's your artificial scarcity. So it's the system that really is broken. And if you are innovative like myself and you follow this methodology, which, by the way, you did the first step, which was to go, wait a minute, how we actually have a place to live. I want to go back in time and see if it's always been like this, because and then you can see, no, it hasn't. Therefore, it doesn't have to be. We could actually invent a way that works.
Well, we would be reinventing it, because I think, if you look at the way that society started, it was living in a group for protection of the whole group. You felt safer if you were around a group of people that were, looking after you and you were looking after them, and you were working locally to where you lived. And so you kept a tight group around you all of the time. And that's how we grew as a society. And we've mutated that into something that's, as you say, is not sustainable, and we need to start looking at how we return to something much more sustainable. And I'm actually seeing a lot of discussion about making cities more livable, and I think that's part of the same thing, that trying to remove the need to travel long distances from where you live to where you work, because that requires you to have a car a lot of the time, because a lot of the time you can't get from where you live to where you work without a car. Certainly not in New Zealand. If you're going to rely on the buses, your commute becomes very difficult. That's that whole issue around making cities more livable, I think, is one step on that road to transitioning from a a commuting society to a walkable society.
Yep. And I think you said it a couple of times in there. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And that is the question. So now that I think we can answer that question with a engineering process, a co-engineering process, I guess I should say. We have found that it isn't just engineering solutions, it's co-engineered solutions.
Yeah.
Now that we can do that, we can just get onto it. So before I took this position in Scotland, I recorded the transition engineering course, and that has been offered ever since from Canterbury University. I am teaching it from Heriot-Watt University in Scotland as well, and they have a global online course system. Yeah. I will say the Canterbury one is infinitely cheaper. One good thing about having a low currency. But they also get people from around the world taking the course. So I think we're on the cusp of a new thing, a new way of doing where we honor our future. Mm-hmm. And again, we just don't accept unsustainability anymore. It's unacceptable. Yeah. And yeah, we when the council requires the transition engineering in the work that they have, when they have their council officers trained in transition engineering, then we'll know we're making progress. Now, one thing I have to say is that transition engineering isn't done. It's started. Yeah. And as all disciplines go, it will get better. The more clever people start doing it and, add new ideas and new methods and new tools to the toolbox and experiences. There's only been a few of these projects, mostly done by myself, but now a growing number because of the people doing the class, which includes a project. There's a growing body of knowledge to learn from. Yep. And basically just don't accept the wickedness. Don't accept the wicked problems that they're just like that. And definitely don't just keep swirling. The transition engineering is very accessible. We've had people from all backgrounds do the course, including business people who basically have said, wait a minute, I can transition my business. Thinking like this just makes sense that if something is wrong, then we change it. So instead of getting stuck on the idea that change is hard and we don't want to change, we can actually get past that and do the work.
Yeah. And do you see things like the circular economy feeding as part of the transition engineering as well, that's trying to be more sustainable and trying to reduce the amount of waste in everything we do?
Well, there's a couple of things. We know that business as usual is not sustainable, right? That's a problem. We've been working on being more sustainable for 30 or 40 years. That is business as usual. Yeah. So true. Just like I said, try to not say solution, try not to say more sustainable.
Yeah, okay.
Because more sustainably unsustainable is still extinct. That's where that's going.
Yeah, we need to get to a point where it's
survival. We have to shift into a new way of doing things. So you were asking we talked about housing, and you were asking about, oops, you got to remind me, it's getting late here.
Well, just really, I think we talked about housing and how do we make housing, it's a vital part of human existence. It's something we all need somewhere to live, and it's how we make that more accessible without the issues that we've got around pricing. When you look at the house pricing in Christchurch at the moment, it's just ludicrous how much houses have gone up. And yet you're right, there is no driver for it other than the agents who claim a fee based on a percentage of the value of your house, and the market sitting behind them.
It's such a Ponzi scheme. I should give you a little hint of the new transition market system. How about a little hint? You want a little hint?
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right. What it really comes down to is the finance.
Yeah.
Right. So here's a question. I build a house today, or I buy a house today. Worse if I buy it, but if I build it, at least I brought a dwelling into existence. Yep. And for that privilege, I'm going to pay $1 million to the contractor, and I'm going to pay $1.5 million to the bank. Yep. For the interest. Yep. So as a person, I've taken on this huge burden, this debt slavery. I've taken that on. Yeah. Now, that house should house 7 or 8 generations of people without too much trouble.
Yeah.
At least 100 years if we've built it properly at all. So why have I taken on that burden for 7 generations of people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's worse than that, because not only do I take it on, but the person I sell it on to now takes on an even bigger burden for a house that's already been built.
Yeah.
And so this is it's a classic Ponzi scheme. All right.
Yes.
So what we have to do is crash the Ponzi scheme. And the way to do that is a version of co-housing or cooperative housing or social housing, something that the actual value to the community of the housing is recognized. It doesn't need debt in order to create it. And you certainly don't have to go into debt in order to live there.
Yeah.
And so I guess a transition, because right now, if you own a house and you've almost paid it off, you're going to be like, I don't want to listen to this person. I want my $1.5 million out of it. Did I insulate it while I lived in it? No. Did I fix the roof while I lived in it? No. Did I?
Well, yes to 2 of those things, no. Actually.
But
the house that I'm in,
$1.5 million.
Yeah, I put additional insulation. I put additional insulation into the loft in this house, even though it's a new house and it was built to code. And we've got solar panels on the roof, and we are trying to reduce our impact as much as we can. But
right.
Yeah, you're right.
What I'm saying is your neighbor who didn't do any of those things will get the same price for their house as you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's no incentive to actually build the 500-year house that is very energy efficient and very healthy. And it's all about the incentive and the means by which to do it. And if that sounds impossible, it really shouldn't, because it's simpler than the one we do now.
Yeah.
It's about putting together the governance rules, establishing a zone, a special development zone where we do the first project where we create this kind of a neighborhood. And it's probably going to be a recreation, because we definitely have houses that were not built for 500 years and they're not healthy. So those are the ones that we're going to recreate in a walkable area with, just think of all the things that you would have in a neighborhood. Why not just do that? Why not build all those values when you do this project?
Mm-hmm.
Circular. That's what you asked me about. Circular
economy. Yes. Yeah.
Circular economy. I think a little bit that circular economy is kind of one of those solutions we want. It sure sounds like a solution. It sounds like a thing that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's not the thing itself. So circular economy is the thing we want, like 15-minute neighborhood. You still have to actually do the work changing to that. So we still have the how do we. And that's fine, because circular economy is going to require redesign and cradle to cradle, which when you redesign and redevelop what isn't that, you can always make it that.
Yeah. Right.
So, like I said, I have lots of hope for the future, because I have seen it. I can see that we can do it. Now, every once in a while, I look at my watch and how many years I've got left, and I think this isn't happening fast enough. How can I make it happen faster? And that was actually behind my decision to go to Scotland. I just thought, we had the freedom to do this research in New Zealand. We appear to be the only people on the planet who've had that freedom. We've broken out with these new ideas of how do we actually change what needs changing. And so I don't know that from New Zealand I'm going to be able to have the impact to make this the next thought revolution, to really have a evolution of the fields of engineering, because they must evolve to include our survival in them. But they can.
That would seem like a basic need, wouldn't it?
Yes.
We've got to be able to survive.
Just
Seems like on top of the list, really. Okay, so what are you actually doing in the Orkney Isles then? What is it that's taken you to Scotland, and what are you actually doing right now?
Well, like I said, I published this book, which says Transition Engineering on it, Building a Sustainable Society. And it's just a little book. I made it as absolutely short as possible.
Okay. It's
just the core ideas and the core methods. The president of Heriot-Watt University, which is in Edinburgh in Scotland, yes, an industrial and financial powerhouse university. is an engineer, and he read the book. He got the book and read it and just thought, wait a minute. Heriot-Watt University was at the forefront of steam power, of the engineering for using steam power for the Industrial Revolution. Thus, Watt. Heriot-Watt was at the forefront of the financial revolution of banking and finance through the research that it supported. And Heriot-Watt University was at the absolute forefront of petroleum geology.
Well, the North Sea oil fields are probably part of that, I guess.
Of transition engineering.
Yeah.
That's just, he bought the book and handed it out to all the senior members of staff. And then they came and talked me into coming. And how did they get me? Well, they said, you can set up for teaching transition engineering in this global online context. And you can, and I spent a couple of years building a center. So it's called the Island Center for Net Zero. And it's about doing the transition engineering projects in the Orkney Islands, Shetland Islands, and Outer Hebrides.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's some very, very remote parts of, and not very nice environments either, because the North Sea is not the most pleasant of places to be in the middle of.
It's not cozy.
No, it really isn't. No.
A little bit like Invercargill with about 60-mile-an-hour winds half the time. So yeah.
So I mean, you've actually built a sustainable community. Is that the context of what you've said?
We've built a center that will work with the community to do these next steps.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Do you have a website for that as well?
Yes, but it's just launched, so it doesn't have great examples and stuff, but I can send you the links.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please do. Because I think, this sort of, going to say it's radical approach to what needs to be done, because it is outside the norm. It's worth getting out there, I think, and getting some publicity behind it. So if you're happy to send the links, I'm definitely keen to get them up on the podcast once it's published. Well, is there anything else you want to share? Because we've been talking for an hour now, and I'm conscious that it's getting later for you, and I've got to get to work at some point. So. Right.
Well, I just think again, things feel hopeless. No doubt about that. The news isn't good, but there is hope in our ability to face our fears and apply science and use everything that we've got to build our survival. To do that, it would really help to understand that we could, and to just get that message out. It's pretty simple. And then get 10,000 people trained a year to just practice. There is a parallel that we always use, which is the corrective transdisciplines of the past, which are safety engineering, fire engineering, risk management, waste management, engineering, these fields that correct the mistakes.
Yeah.
Every one of those corrective fields was because of a man-made disaster in an extremely successful, profitable, and legal system.
Yeah.
So we do it again. We follow the lessons of history, and we get on with it.
Okay. Well, look, thank you for ending on a positive note. It's a good way to finish. Look, Susan, it's been absolutely excellent to talk to you. I'm really pleased that you made the time to talk to me. It's excellent to talk to you. Thank you very much for taking the time. And I hope to talk to you again.
Sure. Thanks for finding me.
No problem at all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to my podcast mini-series, A Penny for Your Thoughts on Sustainability. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Like, share and follow for more episodes. Thank you.